Hello, my name is Landon. I'm 29 years old and work as a financial analyst at a company in Omaha, Nebraska, a quiet city nestled in the heart of America, where roads stretch through endless cornfields and the autumn winds carry a crisp chill. Unlike the bustling chaos of New York or the dazzling allure of Los Angeles, Omaha has the understated calm of the Midwest, where people still greet each other every morning and know their neighbors by name. Yet for me, Omaha has never truly felt like home. I grew up here in what I call my foster family, but ever since I was a child, I've always felt like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit into their picture. I don't clearly remember how I came to be adopted. The stories of the day I joined this family were only recounted through the cold whispers of my foster mother, Ellen, during moments when she was displeased with me. "We saved you from a worthless life," she would often say, her tone implying that I owed her the world. I was adopted as an infant, not even 3 months old. My foster parents, Robert and Ellen, were well off, living in a spacious 2-story house in the suburbs of Omaha, with a lush green lawn and a pristine white picket fence. They had 2 biological children, Eric, 2 years younger than me, and Hannah, 5 years my junior. On paper, I was part of this family, but in their hearts, I was merely a faint shadow. From a young age, I noticed I was different. It wasn't just that my dark brown hair or blue eyes didn't resemble anyone else's in the family, though that did make me wonder about my origins. The difference lay in how they treated me. During parent-teacher conferences at school, my foster mother would introduce Eric and Hannah as her son and daughter, but when it came to me, she'd simply say, "This is Landon." Nothing more, nothing less. The word son seemed too lavish to be used for me. I remember one time when I was about 7, standing in the corner of the room during a family Christmas party. Everyone was gathered, taking photos in front of a twinkling Christmas tree. But when I tried to join, Hannah pushed me away. "You don't need to be here," she said, her tone as if I were an uninvited guest. My foster mother just smiled, patted Hannah's head, and kept snapping photos. I stood there watching the flickering lights, feeling like the whole world was laughing and celebrating while I was left on the sidelines. All my efforts to be acknowledged were in vain. I excelled in school, always at the top of my class, bringing home report cards and certificates that covered the fridge. I helped my foster mother wash dishes, sweep the yard, even learned to fold clothes the way she liked. But all I got in return were cold nods or a curt "good." Once I overheard her talking to my foster father in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep. "He does it because he knows he has to. We gave him a home. He owes us." Those words cut like a knife into my tender heart. I wasn't their son. I was an obligation. But there was one person in this family who made me feel like I truly existed, my grandfather, Henry. He lived on a small farm 2 hours' drive from Omaha, where cornfields stretched endlessly and the night sky sparkled with stars. Every summer when school was out, I was sent to stay with him. Those were the only months I felt alive, truly loved. Grandpa never called me Landon in a dry, detached way. To him, I was kiddo, or my dear boy. He taught me how to fix cars in his garage, thick with the smell of motor oil, showed me how to grow tomatoes in his garden, and on quiet evenings he'd sit on the porch strumming folk tunes on his old guitar while I sang along, even though my voice was far from impressive. Grandpa was the only one who truly saw me. When I was 12, I sat with him on the porch swing watching a fiery red sunset on the horizon. I blurted out, "Grandpa, why don't Mom and Dad love me?" He stopped strumming, resting his hand on my shoulder. His eyes, etched with the wrinkles of time, looked at me for a long moment. "Landon," he said, his voice deep and warm, "you're the best thing that family doesn't know how to cherish. Don't let your kindness depend on how they treat you. You're worth so much more than that." Those words seared into my mind, a small flame flickering through my darkest days. I also remember another time when Grandpa took me out to the field behind his farm. As we sat watching the sunset, he suddenly asked, "Do you ever think about your real mother?" The question stunned me. I hadn't thought much about her. My foster mother always said my biological mother was irresponsible and that I shouldn't bother with her. But Grandpa's eyes, filled with mystery and concern, made my heart race. "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. "I don't think she wanted me." Grandpa took my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Never think that, Landon. There are stories you don't know yet, but one day it'll all make sense." Those vague words planted a seed of curiosity in me, a sense that my life might hold a secret bigger than I could imagine. But the warmth of those summers with Grandpa couldn't erase the loneliness inside me. Each time I returned to Omaha, I faced the cold indifference of my foster family. Eric always saw me as a rival not worth his attention. He'd mock me in front of his friends, calling me the stray when he thought no one could hear. Hannah was different. She wasn't openly cruel, but her eyes always held a distance, as if I were a stranger living under the same roof. I tried not to let it break me. I told myself that if I worked harder, studied better, behaved perfectly, one day they'd see me differently. But deep down, I knew that hope was as fragile as a thread. Every morning I woke up in my small attic room, the only one in the house without a big window overlooking the front yard. Eric and Hannah had spacious rooms decorated with posters and toys, while mine had just a single bed, an old desk, and a flickering desk lamp. I didn't complain. I'd learned that complaining only made my foster mother frown and say, "You should be grateful you have a place to sleep." But every time I walked down the stairs, I felt like a guest in my own home. There's one memory I'll never forget. When I was 14, the family threw a birthday party for Hannah. The living room was filled with cake, balloons, and laughter. I'd spent a week making a leather bracelet for her, hoping she'd like it. I wrapped it carefully in a small box, tied it with a red ribbon, and placed it on the gift table. When Hannah opened it, she glanced at the bracelet, then set it aside to open more expensive gifts. A new iPod from our parents, a pair of shoes from Eric. My foster mother didn't even notice my gift. I stood in the corner, feeling like my heart was being crushed. After the party, I found the bracelet in the trash, mixed with crumpled wrapping paper. I picked it up, cleaned it off, and tucked it away in my personal box. That was the last time I tried giving a gift to anyone in the family. Another painful memory came when I was 16. I decided to do something to make my foster father proud. Robert was a stern man, always busy with his real estate business. He rarely spoke to me, but I'd heard him brag to friends about fixing the family's old truck. I thought if I could do something similar, he'd see me differently. I snuck into the garage with the tools Grandpa had left me from a previous summer. Eric's old bike with a flat front tire sat in the corner. I spent hours oiling it, tightening bolts, trying to make it rideable again. When my foster father came home, I excitedly pulled him to the garage to show him. But he just glanced at it and said, "Don't touch Eric's stuff. It's not yours." I stood there, frozen, feeling like the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. I wanted to explain that I was just trying to help, but the words stuck in my throat. I went back to my room, shut the door, and cried alone. My childhood passed like that, a mix of warm summers with Grandpa and cold winters in a grand but loveless house. I learned to hide my emotions, to smile even when my heart was breaking. I told myself that one day I'd find where I truly belonged. But back then, I didn't know that journey would lead me to truths more painful than anything I'd ever experienced. As I turned 18, the opportunity to leave Omaha came like an escape hatch. I received a full scholarship to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, just over an hour's drive from home. It wasn't a great distance, but to me it felt like a doorway to a new world. On the day I packed my bags, my foster mother, Ellen, stood at my bedroom door, arms crossed, her eyes as cold as ever. "Take care of yourself," she said, her voice flat, like she was addressing a tenant. My foster father, Robert, merely nodded, his eyes glued to his newspaper. I dragged my suitcase out of the house, my heart heavy but flickering with a spark of hope. Maybe by leaving I'd find where I truly belonged. University was a breath of fresh air. In Lincoln, no one knew me as the adopted kid or the outsider. I threw myself into my studies, choosing finance because I knew I was good with numbers and analysis. Late nights in the library, essays stretching dozens of pages, presentations in front of the class. They were all chances to prove my worth, not to my foster family, but to myself. I worked part-time at a coffee shop near campus, saving every penny so I wouldn't have to ask my foster parents for money. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet to show that I didn't need their validation to succeed. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling of being adrift clung to me. Lying in my dorm bed at night, listening to my roommates snoring, I often thought about my family. I wondered if they ever thought of me, if they were ever proud of how far I'd come. I wrote handwritten letters home, sharing small victories, like getting an A in macroeconomics or being chosen as a teaching assistant. But those letters only received brief email replies from my foster mother. "Good job, Landon. Keep it up." Nothing more, nothing less. I saved those emails in a separate folder on my computer, as a way to comfort myself that at least they responded. Every summer, I returned to my grandfather's farm instead of the house in Omaha. Those days remained a balm for my soul. Grandpa was older now, his hair snow-white, his back slightly hunched, but his eyes still lit up whenever he saw me. He taught me new songs on his old guitar, told me stories of his youthful adventures, and sometimes he'd repeat the words that haunted me. "One day, Landon, you'll know the truth." I asked what he meant, but he'd only smile, pat my shoulder, and say, "Time will tell." I didn't dare press further, but those words grew like a mysterious seed in my heart. In my final year of college, I graduated with honors, top of my finance class. At the commencement ceremony, I stood on stage, accepting my diploma with a radiant smile, but inside I felt hollow. I had sent invitations to my foster parents, even called them directly to invite them. "We're very busy, Landon," my foster mother said over the phone, her voice flat. "But congratulations." I looked out at the audience, where other families were clapping, hugging, and taking photos. Only Grandpa was there, seated in the back row, wearing an old but neatly pressed suit. When I stepped off the stage, he hugged me so tightly I could feel the warmth of his chest. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he whispered. I smiled, but tears silently fell. It was the first time I'd cried in front of him. After graduation, I received a job offer from a financial firm in Omaha. I decided to return, not for my foster family, but to be near Grandpa. The years working in Omaha after graduation were a time of building a new version of myself. I worked tirelessly, staying late at the office, poring over financial reports as if they held the key to a new life. My colleagues started calling me Iron Landon because I rarely rested or complained. But they didn't know that every night when I returned to my small apartment, I sat in the dark, listening to the folk songs Grandpa used to play, wondering if I was living the right way. As my career stabilized, my income grew. I began sending money to my foster parents each month, not because they asked, but because I thought it was a way to repay them. But whenever I called to check in, my foster mother would only say things like, "Thank you, but you don't have to do that." Eric and Hannah, now adults, still leaned on our parents. Eric had dropped out of college and spent his days hanging out with friends, while Hannah was obsessed with shopping and posting on social media. I didn't resent them. I just hoped that one day they'd see me as part of the family. 6 years later, I was promoted to lead analyst at the company. It was a major milestone, not just for the pay raise, but because I felt closer to my dream, building a life I could be proud of. Yet no matter how successful I became, I couldn't fill the void in my heart. I longed for a family, not the grand house in Omaha's suburbs, but a place where I truly belonged. Then an idea struck me. A Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving is a time for people to gather, to give thanks for the good things in life. I thought that if I hosted a perfect dinner and invited the whole family, maybe they'd see me as more than Landon, the adopted kid. Maybe this time they'd look at me with warmer eyes. I spent weeks preparing. I chose an upscale restaurant in downtown Omaha with tables draped in white silk and flickering candlelight. I reserved a table for 6. My foster parents, Eric, Hannah, Grandpa, and me. I handwrote invitations on thick paper with gold ink, pouring my heart into each one. "Dear Mom, I hope you'll come to share the joy of this holiday with me," I wrote in the card to my foster mother. I sent personal texts to Eric and Hannah asking them to make time for dinner. I even called my foster father saying how much I looked forward to seeing everyone. "I'll check my schedule," he said, his voice flat. I didn't let it discourage me. I pre-ordered the food: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, all the traditional dishes I knew they liked. Inside, a flame of hope burned brightly. Maybe this time they'll come, I told myself, though my heart trembled with fear. On Thanksgiving Day, I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, adjusting my tie and smoothing out the navy suit I'd carefully chosen. I looked into my own eyes in the reflection. Those deep blue eyes my foster mother once said didn't look like anyone else's in the family. I told myself, today will be different. Today, they'll see me. I arrived at the restaurant early at 5 p.m. as the sunset bathed Omaha's streets in golden light. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, led me to the table I'd reserved. The setup was perfect: crisp white tablecloth, 6 gleaming silver place settings, and candles casting a soft orange glow. I checked everything, from the folded napkins to the small vase of flowers at the center. "Your family must be a lively bunch," the waitress said, smiling. I nodded, trying to hide the anxiety churning in my stomach. "Yeah, I hope so." I sat down, glancing at my watch. 6 p.m., the appointed time. The restaurant began to fill up, other families arriving, their laughter and chatter like a cheerful melody. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. They might be on their way, I reassured myself, though my heart started pounding with unease. I texted Hannah, "Are you here yet?" "I'm waiting at the restaurant." No reply. I tried calling Eric, but it rang endlessly before going to voicemail. "Hey Eric, I'm at the restaurant. Is everyone coming soon?" I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. No one answered. By 6:30, I felt a burning sensation at the back of my neck. The tables around me were full. A family at the next table laughed loudly as their young child spilled sauce on their shirt. An elderly couple held hands, their eyes brimming with love. I stared at my empty table, the 6 chairs sitting silently as if mocking me. I called my foster mother, my hands trembling as I dialed. The phone rang 5 times before she picked up. "Landon," her voice cut through me like ice. "Your father's not feeling well, and we've already eaten here. You'll manage, right?" In the background, I heard Hannah's laughter, the clink of dishes, Eric saying something about a football game. They were at home, gathered together as they always were, as if I'd never existed. "Yeah, I'll manage," I replied, my voice catching as if someone were squeezing my throat. I hung up, set the phone on the table, and stared at the flickering candles. Their light reflected off the wine glass, but it didn't warm me. I felt like the whole world was laughing and celebrating, while I was left behind once again in the loneliness I'd spent years trying to escape. I called the waitress over and asked for a small portion of turkey and mashed potatoes. "Just you tonight?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with pity. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just me." The food was placed before me, the aroma of roasted turkey and herbs making my stomach rumble, but every bite felt like it was stuck in my throat. I looked at the empty chair where my foster mother was supposed to sit, the ones for my foster father, Eric, and Hannah. I imagined them laughing at home, eating the dishes I'd chosen, but without me. Tears welled up, but I bit my lip hard, refusing to let them fall. I'd cried enough during my childhood. I told myself I was stronger than this, but the truth was I wasn't strong. I was just a 29-year-old man sitting alone in a fancy restaurant, trying to cling to a dream that had shattered long ago. I wondered what I'd done wrong. I'd studied hard, worked tirelessly, sent them money, planned this dinner with all my heart. So why didn't they choose me? I stared at the plate of turkey, now cold, and felt like I was eating my own pain. The waitress passed by, her eyes full of sympathy. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, but I knew I wasn't. I'd never been okay. I reached for my phone, intending to call Grandpa. He was the one person I knew would never abandon me. But before I could dial, the restaurant door opened. A gust of cold autumn air rushed in, carrying the scent of fall. I looked up and my heart seemed to stop. Grandpa walked in wearing his old wool coat, his white hair glinting under the lights. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on me, and that familiar smile spread across his face. "Sorry I'm late, kiddo," he said, his voice as warm as those summer evenings at the farm. He sat down across from me, placing his frail hands on the table and grasping mine. His hands trembled slightly, but their warmth pulled me back from the edge of an abyss. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I thought you weren't coming either." He shook his head, his eyes filled with love but also a trace of indescribable sadness. "I'd never leave you alone, Landon, never." He squeezed my hand and then his voice turned serious, as if he were about to say something more important than anything in my life. "Landon," he said, looking straight into my eyes, "have you ever wondered why I've always loved you more than anyone else?" His question hit me like a bolt of lightning, striking my chest. I stared at him, speechless, feeling like time had stopped. The candles on the table still flickered, but the world around me seemed to shrink, leaving just me and Grandpa. I knew this question wasn't simple. It carried a secret, a truth he'd kept hidden for years. "Why, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice trembling. He took a deep breath, as if summoning courage. He looked out the window where the streetlights glowed faintly in the night. "Landon," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "there are things I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I waited for the right moment. And maybe that moment is now." He paused, his eyes returning to me, filled with determination. "You're not just my grandson. You're part of a story that both you and I have been caught up in." My heart pounded. I felt like I was standing before a door, and Grandpa held the key. "What story, Grandpa?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled an old yellowed envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table, sliding it toward me. "Open it, Landon," he said. "But before you do, promise me one thing. No matter how painful the truth is, you won't let it destroy who you are." I looked at the envelope, my hands shaking as I touched it. I didn't know what was inside, but I felt its weight. Not the weight of paper, but of the years I'd lived, of the questions I'd never dared to face. I looked at Grandpa, and in his eyes I saw both love and fear. "Grandpa," I said, my voice breaking, "I'm ready." Grandpa nodded slowly, his gaze piercing through me, as if he were looking back at years long gone that I had never known. The restaurant around us buzzed with laughter and conversation, but for me, the world had narrowed to just me, Grandpa, and the weathered envelope on the table. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my heart pounded as if it might burst. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it were something fragile. Inside was a faded photograph, a handwritten letter, and a business card. I picked up the photo first. It showed a young woman with blonde hair and blue eyes identical to mine. She was smiling, but her smile carried an indescribable sadness. I looked at Grandpa, my brows furrowing. "Who is this, Grandpa?" He took a long breath, as if gathering the courage to tell a story he'd kept buried for too long. "Landon," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "the woman in that photo is your biological mother." I felt the blood in my veins stop flowing. I looked back at the photo, my hands trembling. My biological mother? I'd heard my foster mother, Ellen, mention her a few times, but always with a tone of contempt, as if she were an irresponsible woman who'd abandoned me. But the face in this photo didn't look like that kind of person. She looked fragile, like someone carrying a world of pain. "You need to know the truth," Grandpa continued, his voice heavy. "But first, let me tell you the story from the beginning." He paused, looking out the window at the dim streetlights in the Omaha night. "Over 30 years ago, I worked as a driver for a wealthy family in Denver. They were rich, powerful, but full of drama, the kind of family stories I used to tell you about. The woman in the photo, her name was Clara, was the eldest daughter of that family. A bright, beautiful heiress, but her heart belonged to a man her family didn't approve of. I listened, feeling like I was falling into a story that didn't belong to me. Grandpa explained that Clara had fallen in love with a poor man, a wandering musician named David. He had a charming smile and big dreams, but Clara's family saw him as a gold digger. When Clara became pregnant, her family was furious. They disowned her, cut off all contact, leaving her alone with a baby on the way. David, the man Clara had put all her trust in, abandoned her too when he realized he couldn't gain anything from her wealthy family. Clara was left in despair, homeless, without family, with only an unborn child. Me. Clara came to me in her darkest days, Grandpa said, his eyes clouding as if reliving the memory. She'd been kicked out by her parents, living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of Denver, working part-time at a coffee shop to survive. I'd stop by to check on her after work, and we grew close. She told me about her dreams, about wanting to give her child a better life, but she knew she couldn't do it, not then. He paused, his voice catching. When you were born, Clara begged me for help. She said she needed time to rebuild her life, to become a mother worthy of you. She asked me to take you in. My chest felt heavy. I looked at the photo, trying to picture this woman, my mother, in those lonely, painful days. So, what did you do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grandpa lowered his head, his hands clenching together. At the time, my son, your foster father, Robert, and Ellen had been married for a few years but hadn't had children. I convinced them to adopt you. I thought it was the best way to give you a home, a family. I was wrong. He paused, his eyes filled with regret. I didn't expect them to treat you the way they did. I thought they'd love you like their own, but every time I saw them push you away, it broke my heart. I looked back at the photo. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, or just emptiness? What about my real mother? I asked, my voice faltering. Where did she go? Grandpa picked up the business card from the table and handed it to me. Clara is a successful woman now, he said. After leaving you, she left Denver, started over. She went to college, built a career, and now she's an entrepreneur in Seattle. She's been looking for you for over 10 years. Recently, she found me. She wants to meet you, Landon, but she's afraid of disrupting your life. She wants you to decide. I took the business card and read the name. Clara Thornton, CEO, Thornton Enterprises. An address in Seattle, a phone number. I turned the card over, feeling like I was holding a piece of myself. Then I opened the letter, recognizing the soft, slanting handwriting. Dear Landon, it began. I don't know if you'll ever want to hear from me, but I've never stopped thinking about you. I stopped, feeling like my breath was caught in my chest. I glanced at Grandpa, sitting across from me, his frail hands clasped tightly, his eyes a mix of worry and patience. I knew he was waiting, watching to see how I'd react to the truth just revealed. I took a deep breath and continued reading. I'm writing this letter hoping that one day you'll read it, though I'm not sure if you'll want to hear from me. I made the biggest mistake of my life leaving you, but please believe it wasn't because I didn't love you. You were my light, the only thing that kept me going in my darkest days. When I was pregnant with you, I was just a young girl, disowned by my family, abandoned by the man I loved. I had nothing but my love for you, but I knew I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Henry, your grandfather, was the only one who didn't turn his back on me. He promised to take care of you, and I trusted him. I left, not because I wanted to forget you, but because I wanted to become a mother you could be proud of. I went to college, worked day and night, and now I've built a stable life. But not a single day has passed without me thinking of you, wondering how you're living, if you're happy. I've been searching for you for over 10 years, but every time I think about meeting you, I'm afraid. Afraid you'll resent me, afraid I'll disrupt your life. If you're reading this letter, I only ask for a chance to explain, to say the apology I've held in my heart for 29 years. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope one day you'll understand. I love you, Landon. I always have. Your mother, Clara Thornton. I folded the letter, tears silently streaming down my cheeks. I didn't know why I was crying. For Clara's pain, for the years I grew up in the cold indifference of my foster family, or for the feeling of having found a piece of myself yet fearing it might break me. I looked at the photo in my hand, Clara's face, her blue eyes so much like mine. I tried to imagine her in those days, a young woman alone holding me on her last night before entrusting me to Grandpa. I didn't know what to feel, anger, pity, or just an indescribable void. Grandpa, I said, my voice choked, what do I do now? I placed the letter on the table, looking at him, searching for an answer, a direction. Should I meet her, or forget this and keep living as if I never knew? Grandpa took my hand, his trembling but warm. Landon, he said, his voice low and gentle, I can't decide for you. This truth belongs to you, and only you know what your heart is telling you. I just want you to remember one thing. No matter how difficult the path you choose, you're never alone. I'll always be here. And Clara, she's waiting for you too. I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and love he'd given me all these years. He wasn't just my grandfather. He was the one who kept his promise to Clara, who sheltered me when the world turned its back. I took a deep breath, feeling a decision forming in my heart. I want to meet her, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I want to go to Seattle. I need to see what she's like now. And I need to hear her story from her own lips. Grandpa smiled, a smile of both pride and relief. Then do what feels right, kiddo. But before you go, is there anything else you want to do? Anything you need to settle before stepping into this new chapter? I thought for a moment, then an idea sparked. I want to stop by my foster parents' house, I said, my voice low but resolute. I want to tell them about this. Not to argue or blame, but to let them know I've found a part of myself. I want them to understand that I'm no longer the adopted kid they can ignore. Grandpa nodded, a glint of resolve in his eyes. All right, Landon, I'll go with you. Whatever happens, I'll be there. We left the restaurant, my mind still reeling from Clara's letter. The Omaha night was cold, the wind sending a shiver through me, but Grandpa's presence beside me made me feel grounded. We climbed into his old pickup truck, the familiar smell of motor oil and wood reminding me of summers at the farm. You sure about this, Landon? He asked as he started the engine. Facing them won't be easy. I'm sure, I replied, though a part of me was still afraid. I didn't know how my foster parents would react, but I knew I needed to do this, not to prove anything, but to close one chapter of my life before opening the next. We drove through Omaha's familiar streets, past houses glowing with Thanksgiving lights, families gathered together. When we pulled up to the grand two-story house of my foster parents, my heart pounded. Light spilled from the living room and I heard Hannah's laughter, Eric's lively chatter. They were still celebrating as if my dinner had never existed. I stepped out of the truck, Grandpa by my side. I knocked on the door, and when my foster mother, Ellen, opened it, her eyes flickered with surprise before settling back into their familiar coldness. Landon, she said, her voice flat. What brings you here so late? I need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. To everyone. She hesitated but opened the door wider. I stepped inside, Grandpa following, and saw my foster father, Robert, in his armchair. Eric and Hannah eating pumpkin pie on the sofa. They looked at me, but no one stood to greet me. What's this about, Landon? Robert asked, his tone slightly irritated, as if I were an inconvenience. I took a deep breath, feeling Grandpa's hand rest lightly on my shoulder. I just learned the truth about my biological mother, I said, my voice firm but tinged with emotion. She's alive and I'm going to Seattle to meet her. I just wanted you all to know because I've called you family for 29 years. Silence enveloped the room. Hannah stopped chewing, Her eyes flickering with unease, Eric smirked as if about to make a snide remark, but Grandpa's stern look silenced him. Ellen crossed her arms, her gaze icy. "Is that so?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think finding your real mother will change anything? You're still just the adopted kid, Landon. Don't get any illusions." Her words cut like a knife, but this time I didn't let them bring me down. "I'm not delusional," I replied, meeting her eyes. "I just want to live true to myself. Thank you for giving me a home, but I don't need anyone in this room to validate me anymore." Robert stood, about to say something, but Grandpa raised a hand to stop him. "Enough, Robert," he said, his voice like thunder. "You've had 29 years to treat this boy like a son, and you've failed. Now let him walk his own path." I turned and walked out of the house, feeling like I'd shed a heavy burden. Grandpa followed, and as we got back in the truck, he took my hand. "You did good, kiddo," he said, his voice full of pride. Back at my apartment, I began preparing for the trip to Seattle. I held Clara's business card, typing her number into my phone, but my finger hesitated before pressing call. I wasn't ready to talk, not ready to hear the voice of the woman who gave birth to me. But I knew I needed to meet her, to look into her eyes and understand why she left me, and whether she truly loved me as she wrote in her letter. I looked at Grandpa sitting on my sofa, holding the coffee I'd made for him. "Will you come with me?" I asked. He smiled, that familiar smile I'd leaned on for years. "If you want me to, I'll go. But this is your journey, Landon. I'm just along for the ride." I nodded, a new fire burning in my heart. I would go to Seattle, face Clara, and find answers to the questions that had haunted me for 29 years. 2 days later, Grandpa and I were on an early flight to Seattle. He wore his old wool coat, gripping the armrest tightly as the plane took off. "I'm not much for flying," he muttered, but his smile remained warm. I looked out the window at the white clouds drifting below, wondering if Clara was thinking of me as much as I was thinking of her. I held her business card in my pocket, my fingers tracing the words, Thornton Enterprises. I pictured Clara as a strong, successful woman, but in my mind, I still saw the young girl from the photo, the woman with sad eyes and a fragile smile. When the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, my heart beat faster. Seattle greeted us with a light drizzle, tiny droplets rolling down the taxi's windows as we headed into the city. This place was a world away from Omaha, gleaming skyscrapers, bustling streets, and the faint aroma of coffee everywhere. Grandpa and I checked into a small hotel near downtown. After settling in, he took out his phone and dialed Clara's number. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched, listening to every word. "Clara, it's me, Henry," he began, his voice calm. "I'm in Seattle with Landon. He wants to meet you." After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to me. "Clara will meet us at a coffee shop in Pike Place Market. She's emotional, Landon, but she's also scared, just like you." I nodded, unable to speak. That afternoon, Grandpa and I walked into a cozy coffee shop tucked away in the lively Pike Place Market. The aroma of roasted coffee mingled with the salty scent of the nearby Elliott Bay. The shop had rustic brick walls, small wooden tables, and soft light from hanging lamps. I chose a table by the window where I could see the busy street filled with people carrying umbrellas and shopping bags. Grandpa sat across from me, quietly watching. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted, my hands twisting together, my legs bouncing nervously. "I don't know what to say, what to do. What if she's not what I expect?" Grandpa placed his hand over mine. "Just be yourself, Landon. That's all Clara wants." I nodded, but my heart still pounded. The clock read 2:55 p.m. I kept glancing at the door, jumping every time the bell jingled, hoping it was Clara. Then at exactly 3 p.m., the door opened. A woman stepped in wearing a long navy coat, her blonde hair neatly tied back. She wore glasses, but I instantly recognized those deep blue eyes. The same eyes from the photo, identical to mine. She scanned the room, and when her gaze met mine, she froze. I saw her hand tremble slightly as she walked toward us. I stood, my legs unsteady, Grandpa stood too, offering a gentle smile. "Clara," he said warmly, "this is Landon." Clara looked at me, her eyes dropping to the small teardrop-shaped birthmark on the back of my hand. A trembling smile spread across her lips. "Landon," she whispered, her voice breaking. You look more like me than I imagined." I didn't know what to say. All I could do was stand there, staring at the woman who gave birth to me. There were no floods of tears, no explosive words, just an awkward mix of emotion, as if we were both afraid to shatter the moment. Clara stepped forward, and before I could react, she pulled me into a hug. It wasn't a tight, overwhelming embrace, but a trembling one, as if she were holding something fragile. I felt her warmth, the faint scent of her perfume, and a strange sensation, like I'd found a part of myself. She whispered in my ear, her voice choked with emotion, "Can you forgive me for letting you grow up so alone?" I didn't answer right away. I hugged her back, feeling time stand still. I thought of my years in Omaha, the nights I cried alone in my attic room, the times my foster family pushed me to the margins. I wanted to say I forgave her, but the words stuck in my throat, not because I didn't want to forgive Clara, my mother, but because I hadn't yet learned to forgive myself for letting pain define me all those years. I let go, looked into her blue eyes so like mine, and whispered, "I'm here now, Mom." It was all I could manage in that moment. Clara smiled, a trembling but hopeful smile. We sat down, Grandpa quietly by our side like a silent guardian. The coffee shop in Pike Place Market buzzed with the chatter of passers-by, the scent of roasted coffee, and the distant sound of waves from Elliott Bay. But in that moment, my world revolved around the woman before me, the one who gave birth to me, left me behind, and was now trying to find her way back to me. "How did you grow up?" Clara asked, her voice soft but eager. "I want to know everything, if you're ready to share." I looked down at the coffee cup in front of me, steam rising faintly. I didn't know where to begin. How could I sum up 29 years of pain, loneliness, but also moments of warmth with Grandpa? I told her about Omaha, the grand but cold house, how I tried to be the perfect son but was always treated as an obligation. I spoke of summers at Grandpa's farm, where I learned to fix cars, grow tomatoes, and play folk tunes on his old guitar. But I didn't mention the nights I cried alone, or the time I found the handmade bracelet in the trash after Hannah's birthday. Those scars were still too deep, and I wasn't ready to expose them. Clara listened, her hands gripping her coffee cup as if to hold back her emotions. When I mentioned Grandpa, she looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Henry," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Grandpa only nodded, his eyes gentle but silent. I knew he was giving Clara and me space to reconnect, though our journey was only just beginning. After our meeting at the coffee shop, Clara invited Grandpa and me to her apartment in downtown Seattle. It was a penthouse on a high floor of a modern building with large glass windows overlooking the shimmering waters of Puget Sound. The interior was simple yet elegant, oak floors, a gray sofa, and abstract paintings on the walls. As I looked around, I couldn't help but compare it to the cramped attic room in Omaha where I grew up, with its flickering desk lamp and dreams that never came true. Clara led us to the living room and poured tea from a white porcelain pot. "Landon," she began cautiously, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I want you to give me a chance to make things right. If you want, you can come here, live in Seattle. I can arrange a good position for you at Thornton Enterprises, or anything you want. I just want you to know that you always have a place here with me." Her offer stunned me. Part of me yearned to accept immediately, a new life, a real family, a place where I wouldn't have to prove my worth. But another part hesitated. I'd spent my whole life standing on my own, relying on no one. Accepting Clara's help, even as my mother, felt like giving up something, maybe my pride, or the fear of being abandoned again. I looked at Grandpa, seeking guidance in his eyes. He gave a gentle smile as if he understood the storm inside me. "What do you think, Landon?" he asked. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through my tangled thoughts. "Thank you, Mom," I said, looking at Clara. "But I don't want to start with a position you've set up for me. If I work at Thornton Enterprises, I want to start from the bottom, like any other employee. I want to rise on my own, not because I'm your son, but because I deserve it." Clara looked at me, her eyes sparkling with a mix of surprise and pride. "You're more like me than I thought," she said, smiling. "All right, Landon, I respect your decision, but whatever you choose, I'll always be here." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just choosing a job, I was choosing how to live, how to define myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt I had the right to do so. A few days later, Clara and I convinced Grandpa to move to Seattle. "I'm getting old, Landon," he said, his voice teasing but his eyes brightening at the suggestion. "But if you and Clara want a grumpy old man hanging around, I won't object." Clara laughed heartily, the first time I'd seen her laugh so freely. "Henry, there's always room for you in my home," she said, "and I think a small garden on the balcony would suit you perfectly." I smiled, picturing Grandpa in Clara's modern penthouse, tending to tomatoes like he did at the farm. The thought warmed my heart. Grandpa wasn't just the man who nurtured me through my lonely years. He was the bridge between Clara and me, the one who kept his promise to both of us. I decided to stay at the penthouse with Grandpa, at least for a while, to be close to him and to learn more about the mother I'd been separated from for 29 years. I applied to Thornton Enterprises and was hired for an entry-level financial analyst position. Not because Clara pulled strings, but because my resume stood out. On my first day, standing in front of the company's gleaming glass building, I felt like a schoolboy on his first day of class. But this time, I wasn't afraid of rejection. I had Clara, Grandpa, and most importantly, myself. The weeks that followed in Seattle were a journey both unfamiliar and miraculous. Clara and I started with small things: dinners together, conversations about our likes, music, and the dreams we'd once had. She told me about her college days, how she stayed up late studying, how she stood in front of the mirror and told herself she had to succeed so she could find me one day. I shared stories of summers with Grandpa, how he taught me to play the guitar and told tales of Denver that I now knew were tied to her. Grandpa adapted quickly to life in Seattle. One evening, we sat together on the balcony looking out at the city lights. He played a familiar folk tune and Clara unexpectedly joined in, her voice soft but full of emotion. I watched them, feeling my heart slowly fill piece by piece. But healing wasn't easy. Some nights I lay awake thinking of my foster family in Omaha. I still felt pain recalling Ellen's cold words, Eric's dismissive smirks, or Hannah's indifference. I wondered if they ever thought of me, if they ever regretted pushing me out of their lives. But then I realized I no longer needed their answers. I had found where I belonged, not in a house, but in the hearts of Clara and Grandpa and within myself. Seattle had become a part of me, even in just a few short months. Every morning I woke up in my small rented apartment near Thornton Enterprises, listening to the waves lapping at Puget Sound and the faint aroma of coffee drifting up from the shop below. I was no longer the boy in the Omaha attic, desperately trying to please a family that didn't need me. I was Landon, 29 years old, a financial analyst building my life step by step with Clara and Grandpa by my side. But the past, no matter how hard I tried, lingered like a shadow, waiting for me to face it one last time. One evening, after finishing a lengthy report at the office, I sat at my small dining table, took out a blank sheet of paper and a pen, and decided to write a letter to my foster family. Not to blame or demand recognition, but to close the most painful chapter of my life. I wanted them to know I'd found happiness, that I was no longer the abandoned adopted child they were used to. Dear Mom, Dad, Eric, and Hannah, I hope you're all doing well. It's been a few months since we last saw each other, and I think it's time I shared a few things. I've found my biological mother, and I'm now living in Seattle, starting a new life. I'm not writing this to blame or resent anyone. I just want to thank you for the years you gave me a roof over my head, even if it never truly felt like home. I've learned that family isn't just the people you live with. It's the ones who choose to love and cherish you. I found that here with my mother and grandpa. I don't expect you to change or feel regret. I only hope you live well as I'm trying to do. Wishing you all the best, Landon. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope and mailed it the next morning. As the envelope left my hands at the post office, I felt a weight lift. I didn't need them to respond or apologize. That letter was my way of saying goodbye to the past, to the years I spent trying to belong somewhere that wasn't meant for me. 4 months later, I received a text from Hannah. It came unexpectedly while I was having lunch with a colleague at Thornton Enterprises. The message was brief, but Hannah's tone was different from her usual indifference. Landon, Mom and Dad are struggling. Eric blew all their savings on gambling. Can you help? I stared at the text, feeling a cold gust from Omaha sweep through me. I wasn't surprised to hear Eric was still living recklessly. He'd always spent money like water, leaning on our foster parents without considering the consequences. Hannah wasn't much different, with her designer bags and lavish trips funded by them. But this time I didn't feel obligated to help. I'd sent them money for years only to receive coldness in return. Now I had a new life, a new family, and I didn't want to be pulled back into that old darkness. I showed the text to Grandpa. He was on the balcony watering the tomato plants he'd grown. He read it, shook his head, his eyes stern. "Landon," he said, his voice low but firm, "you've done more than enough for them. They had their chance to treat you right and they didn't. Don't let them drag you back. You deserve to live your own life." I nodded, feeling the certainty in his words. A few weeks later, Grandpa told me he'd called my foster father, Robert, and made it clear I was no longer responsible for them. "I told them they have to face the consequences of what they've sown," he said, his eyes glinting with resolve. "They can't use you anymore." I didn't ask for details, but I knew Grandpa had done what was necessary. My foster family, with their extravagant lifestyle and Eric and Hannah's irresponsibility, was facing financial ruin. But this time, I didn't feel guilty. I'd given them enough time, enough chances. It was time to focus on my own life. That fall, I hosted a small party at Clara's penthouse to celebrate my 30th birthday. Unlike the lonely Thanksgiving dinner in Omaha this time, the table was filled with laughter and warmth. Clara stood in the kitchen carefully arranging a pumpkin pie, my favorite from the farm days. Grandpa sat in an armchair strumming a folk tune on his old guitar, his eyes sparkling with joy. A few colleagues from Thornton Enterprises joined us. People who'd become friends, who valued me for who I was, not because I was Clara's son. I stood in the middle of the room watching everyone talk and laugh, feeling my heart swell. Clara approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Happy birthday, son," she said softly. It was the first time I'd heard son from a mother without feeling pain. I smiled, hugged her, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for finding me." As the party ended, I stood on the balcony looking out at Seattle's twinkling lights. Grandpa joined me, standing by my side. "How do you feel, kiddo?" he asked. "Free," I replied, my voice steady. "For the first time in my life, I know where I belong." Looking back on my journey, I realized that life isn't about seeking validation from others, but finding value in yourself. I once thought my foster family would give me a home, that if I tried hard enough, they'd love me. I was wrong. Love can't be forced, and family isn't just the people you live with. It's the ones who choose to stand by you, no matter who you are. If I could offer advice to anyone feeling lost, searching for where they belong, I'd say, don't be afraid to face your past, no matter how painful. The truth may hurt, but it can also set you free. Trust in your own worth and seek out those who value you for who you are, not what you do for them. Most importantly, forgive not just others, but yourself, for being strong enough to weather the storms. My life is still unfolding, and I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll keep working at Thornton Enterprises, become a leader like Clara, or discover new dreams, Maybe one day I'll fully forgive Clara, my foster family, and the lonely years I endured. But for now, I know I'm no longer the abandoned child. I'm Landon, and I've found myself. This message isn't just for those who've been rejected, but for anyone searching for meaning in life. I've learned you don't need to be perfect to be loved, and you don't need to hold on to pain forever. Let go, move forward, and believe you're worthy of a place to call home.